9/11, 2021. It was beyond a horrendous day for so many people. And everyone who was around and old enough to remember that day, I promise you, can remember exactly what was going on, where they were, what they were doing. I actually witnessed and seeing the second plane run into the building, into one of the towers. And I wanted to share my story with you guys. So welcome to episode 36 of the Positivity Experience, my 9/11 experience. Check it out. Hey everybody, and welcome back to episode 36 of the Positivity Experience. I am your girl, Lori, and I hope that you guys are doing good. I hope that you guys had a great Labor Day and that you are really settling in, and hopefully that it's getting to be a little bit more fall time, your time, around near you. And it was so funny. So this week I'm in Maryland, and this week we're supposed to have like another sort of like a hot wave, a heat wave, I guess. Hot wave. That's not a thing. A heat wave. And I'm like, man, I'm not ready. Like I'm good. Like I'm ready for fall. Like please let it be 65 highs. I'm ready for this life. And yesterday we were outside, and it was around 7:49 or 7:50, and it was getting like dark. And Paul's like, oh my God, I hate when it gets dark early. I'm like, it means it's fall. Like, I'm like, I could sit out by the fire right now. So, but I am looking forward to it. And this is September 12th. This is actually my dad's birthday. He would be 99 if he was still alive. So today is his birthday, September 12th. But I did want to talk to you guys about September 11th. And, like I said in the trailer, if you were old enough to remember 9/11, you will inadvertently remember where you are, what you were doing, the time and the climate of the day. And so I just kind of wanted to share with you guys my story and my thoughts on the falling man. And we'll talk about the falling man. I believe his name is believed to be Norberto Hernandez. And so that's from what we believe it to be. I'm not exactly sure, but I do want to give some thoughts on that, and some images that you may have seen on him, and some thoughts that I have on it, and how I felt about the next day of September 12th, and why I feel like so many people can, when something happens, you remember it, and then the next day you kind of go back to like old thought patterns, old behaviors. So I did want to talk to you about that. So let's first start about 9/11. So at the time I was in the tri-state area, and where my apartment was, you could see the Twin Towers. You could see where it was. And at the time I was married to Bugsy's dad, and his name's Gene, and just like him. And he was working in the city, in Manhattan, like up near 50th Street by Rockefeller Plaza. And, so I was, at the time I was working, let's see, that's 20 years ago, right? So I was 30. Yeah, I was like 30. So I was still like, I was still in therapy of my own. And, so I was working like at another office, and just, so kind of just there, right? Bugsy was 5. He was in kindergarten. All those things were happening. So had to be at work at like 7:30. Was there, and was at my desk, and it was like, I don't know, it was like 8:45, 8:47, 8:48. And in my office complex, like in the office building, we had a little cafeteria. So it had like, it had coffee, it had like a couple different things in it, and like a little tiny restaurant cafe thing. And so, I was originally going to go down and get it, like to get out of my place and out of my office and go down there. And so one of the people that I was working with said, did you see somebody flew a plane into the building? Well, again, if you watch Marvel comics, if you watch DC comics, if you watch these things, everything wonky kind of happens in New York, right? You're like, oh, okay, somebody ran a building. It's like, oh my gosh, what was this person thinking? Because we don't know it's a commercial airliner. We don't, it literally is, nothing surprises you in the city. It just doesn't. And so I was like, wow, really? I was like, oh, and they're like, yeah, look, you can kind of see where it is. And again, remember, Twin Towers are very high. So it's not like you could look and be like, whoa, that was a airliner. You don't see that. So you just see like smoke coming out from where it was. And so we're outside, and we're looking, and we're like, whoa. I was like, we're talking, we're like, wow, it's a no-fly zone. Like, how in the world did somebody not know that? Were they drinking? Again, you don't know the story behind it. And so we're standing there, we're looking, a bunch of us out there. And you could look off to like the side, like over a little bit. And we glance over, we're like, well, what's that? was like, well, what the hell is that? And we're like, oh my gosh, that's another plane. Is that a plane? And it hit the building, hit the tower. We're like, holy shit, what the hell is going on? What is wrong? Because again, we don't know that this is terrorists. We just don't know what the hell's going on. Now, my cousin was working at the Pentagon. So I don't know anything that's going on in the Pentagon. I don't know. Right now, we're just like, what the hell? Now, my sister-in-law at the time, if you've never been to the World Trade Center, on the top of the World Trade Center on one of the buildings, they had like a restaurant. And the restaurant, it was like you could sit in it and it would rotate really slow. Not like you'd be dizzy, but it was beautiful. It was a beautiful view of the city. And it would rotate slowly. So there's that. And then in another one of them, that's a big hub for where all the trains would come in from Brooklyn, come in from Queens, like all the trains would come in there, like underneath the ground, right? And so my sister-in-law was supposed to be on a train right around that time, right? Because this was around 8:46, I believe, that their first plane hit around that time. And so I think she was supposed to be there around like 9. So we're like, Now, again, towers were still erect. So, and everything was hit kind of higher. So we're like, what the hell is going on? And so we had some people from the office who was it's supposed to be down in the tower. So now I'm like, what is going on? And so we go back inside to that cafe thing. And there's news because duh, it's all over everything. And so they keep replaying the same shots that we just saw. And then they said, they did like a zoom in and you could see that it was like a commercial airliner. And we're like, how did somebody just go steal a plane? Now, again, you're in that moment. You're not like, oh my gosh, somebody went to an airport. They're hijacking a plane. There's people like, you don't think that way. You're just like, how the hell did they get their hands on a plane? And then again, 2001. So it's not like you're walking around with iPhones. And so I go to pick up the phone to call Jean, to call like everything. So I go back inadvertently. Somebody's like, oh, the Pentagon got hit too. And we're like, what? And where he was working was like in that area. So of course I go back there. I can't even get on the phone because when you pick up the phone, it was busy signal. So a lot of times what they'll do in a crisis, an emergency, is they'll block the lines. Like they will shut those lines down. So this way the emergency people can actually, I guess they have an override. I'm not sure, but they're able to make the calls that they need without it flooding the lines. And again, 2001, it's not like Verizon had 100 million towers and like literally you're on your landlines pretty much, right? And so I'm like, oh my gosh, my cousin's there. And I think like in that area, but luckily he was like away at a meeting and at the other side, or it was so bizarre. And I'm like, hey, what the hell? Now I'm thinking I got to go get my kid. And so I called the school and they're like, you can't come get them. We're on a lockdown. And we're used to that now, but we weren't then. I'm like, yeah, what? Like, what? Like, you mean I can't come get my kid? Well, what the hell are you talking about? And they're like, well, you can't. And so I go to pick up because I finally got through. And then I went to pick up the phone again and that was back on busy. And then finally I was I think I was texting, or it was like back in the day texting. Yeah, I think it was texting. And I was talking to Gene and he's like, yeah, well, we can't leave the island. Like we can't get out of Manhattan right now because they blocked. So if you've never been to New York City, it's an island. And I don't think people realize that Manhattan is an island. It is waterlocked. So the only way to get to Manhattan is through a bridge or a tunnel. That's it. You ain't going to Manhattan. Oh, I guess you could swim, but you're not going to walk there. Like you're just not going to get there. So you have the Lincoln Tunnel. That's around 35th Street. You have the Holland Tunnel, which is downtown. And then you have the George Washington Bridge. So if you're coming from the Jersey side, that's what you're going to hit. Now, if you're coming from other boroughs of New York, you're going to take like, the Brooklyn Bridge, the Manhattan Bridge, but that's the only way to get into the city, right? I guess a boat, but like, again, you're not going to just walk there. And so he said, all of our, transportation, we have to stay like we can't take a bus. We can't leave. We can't do this because again, now I think they have wind that there's terrorist activity. And then the plane got stolen from Newark, the one that crashed in Pennsylvania. And, so we know that we're under a terrorist attack now, and everybody's like, well, were you stressed? I feel like, and I guess this is just me and how, I've had a lot of traumas in my life. And there's that part of you that I guess you could, but you don't really you don't fall apart. You just kind of go, okay, I got to figure out life here. Like what the hell's going on? I'm just interested in, well, number one, I have to account for these people who were supposed to be down at the Twin Towers. we finally get a hold of them. Like they just mark safe, not like mark safe on Facebook, like they hit you with a text or a beeper or something like that. So we know they're good. Finally, they're like, okay, everybody can leave. Like everybody's got to go. So it was really weird though, because like the roads were clear, but I have to get back home so I can pick my kid up. And because finally I'm like, listen, I'm just have to wait and see where I can get him. Because again, we don't know if there's going to be 57 more planes. Like you just don't know. Nobody had a clue what the hell was going on. Now, let me preface that by saying I was also in the city for the first attack on the Twin Towers. Now, again, most of you know that, but some of you, if you were a little younger, there was another attack on the Twin Towers like a couple years before in 93. Where they drove a van in. So like, there was parking under there and you would go like, with the little gate thing, and there was a van in there and they blew it up. Like they drove the van in there and blew it up, and it did cause damage, but it wasn't like massive damage like 9/11 was. So, but that also was a terrorist attack. But again, it's Manhattan. Things like this happen a lot. The city, New York. Okay. And so, we were like, okay, again, towers were still, I guess at this point they had fallen. And so that's another thing that we saw. So like when we were outside, because now we're just like, because you can't really be outside when you're trying to leave, but then you can't leave and you want to make phone calls, but you want to see what's going on. And then we were in the cafe looking at it on the news, and we would go outside and look at it because you could see it better on the news because it would screen in. And so that's when the tower started to tumble. And it was like, holy shit. Again, it's literally like watching it in slow motion. And I can tell you, it was a Tuesday. There was puffy white clouds in the sky. It was blue skies. Like I'm telling you, like you can just literally remember everything about the day. Now, so I wasn't in panic. Like I know a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I guess I'm just not that person. It's not that I don't have anxiety. You guys know I have severe anxiety. I don't panic about global things, and I'm not sure why. I just don't. And so I was and I guess that's why I'm good at my job, right? Because like I don't panic. I mean, I have my anxiety. This doesn't mean that I didn't have anxiety afterwards. I'll talk to you about it, but it became like, okay, I saw everybody else falling apart, and I go into, okay, not saving other people. I'm just like, okay, guys, listen, you cannot fall apart, right? This can't happen. Like you can't do this. Like literally you are stronger than your brain right now. I know you're scared, but you can't do this. You got to get to where you're going. Then you can fall apart. So I made sure everybody was out, and then got on the road. So as I'm going in the road, because I'm on the Jersey side, as I'm going on the road, all these, I'm telling you, the amount of fire trucks, ambulances, police cars, helicopters, it was literally like I was watching a movie, right? Because again, everything happens in New York in movies, right? And it's like you were watching it. It's like you were in a movie. I was like, there was a part of you that was like, okay, is Ashton Kutcher going to come out and be like, okay, you're punked? Like what? Because you're not disassociating, but it doesn't feel real, but you know it's real, but you're just focusing on the moment in front of you, right? Because you can't control anything else. So when that happens, I guess that's why I handle it a lot better than maybe nowadays than maybe some people who maybe haven't gone through a lot of trauma, because you just learn, listen, you can't fall apart right now. You have two choices: fall apart and accomplish nothing, or be focused on what you need to do, and then you can process it later, right? You just have to make sure you process it later. Problematic part comes as if you don't process it later, and then it creates an enormous amount of anxiety and problems and insecurities. So there's that. So I get back to the house. And, again, cops everywhere, people are blocking streets. You have to show proof of residency. It's a whole thing. It's not a good vibe, right? It's a vibe, but it's not a good one. And so, finally they were able to release the kids, but it was specific. Like they had to have police procedures, everything. So Bugsy comes home, and then literally, because now we're watching it on TV. Gene can't get there. He's not going to get there for like hours because he's still stuck in the city. We think he's safe because we haven't heard of anything else, and found out my cousin was safe, and then saw everything that happened. And so all you have is TV. It's not like we had Netflix. Not like you'd be like, oh, fuck that. I can't watch this anymore, right? So you're just watching it over and over. And it was, again, watching what we saw, like all of us who were standing there saw it happen. And so it was just, and then we were like, okay, listen, you know what? I can't, because, new news is coming out. You want to know, but there's so much. And you see that nowadays, just, that's why people doom scroll. Like all they do is they just watch negativity and read negative comments and negativity. And finally we were like, listen, we do not have, I could look out my window and see what's going on. Quite literally, you could see the smoke. You could see all that. I don't need to keep watching it. Like I'm not learning anything new, and I'm tired, and I'm now trying to process the anxiety. And then I talked to my girlfriend whose dad was a big police chief at the Harrison Fire Department. I can't remember. And so he was in town. He had to go. He was like almost one of the first responders there from Jersey. And so she's worried about him, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on with her and him, and is he safe? And I got to tell you a story about that. And there'll be a little bit of a trigger warning with that when it comes. And so finally get a hold of Gene, or, Gene gets a hold, and he's like, listen, I'm gonna be home, but it's going to be like 8 hours. So, okay, well, I have to set it and forget it. I can't like clock him and be like, oh, let me go fly and pick him up. Like, that's not a thing. So it's not like we were watching cartoons, but we started watching movies. We're like, okay, let's watch Spider-Man. Let's watch other catastrophic things. Not that Spider-Man was that bad, but like, and it wasn't like the Spider-Man, it's like older stuff. And, let's watch more catastrophic things in New York so we can disassociate but still be present. It's not rational mindset. It just is what it is. But we actually sat there, and so nobody had work for days. So Gene comes home, he's safe. We watch more footage on it. New news is coming out. All these things are happening. People are really in peril. Find out there's a bunch of people like headed down there to help and repair and retrieve people. And I was doing a lot of animal work, and all of the animals that went down there, because those are the unsung heroes a lot too, because there was a crap ton of animals that actually saved so many people, because the dogs would be able to go. I mean, it sounds terrible, but you're going to sacrifice them before you would the humans, because they would have to go in, and they would have to find them in creases and cracks. And luckily they did find some, and unfortunately they didn't find a whole lot. And and so that happened for days on end. And then it comes back to kind of like, I don't want to say getting back to normal, because there wasn't any normal, because the very next day, everybody's a community. Everybody, how like before something happens in your life, people have their own shit that they go through. And then something happens, and then everybody's like, oh my God, we are a unit. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, New Yorkers and the tri-state area in general became, and I'm sure it was like this in other places as well, I'm just giving you my experience, it became a community. It didn't matter what borough you were from, who you are, what color you were, what political affiliate. It did not matter. None of that shit mattered. All that mattered was like, hey, what do you need? What happens? So Bugsy was little, and originally the Red Cross was like, hey, because I do a lot of volunteer, usually for animals, but hey, I'm down for whatever. Like, I'm a New Yorker now. Like, I wasn't born there, but I've been there for years, and that's me. Like, I'm a tri-state girl. And so they were like, yeah, we need 16 to 18 hour days. And I was thinking, well, that can't happen because I have my kid, right? Like, I mean, I want to do it, but I just can't. And they literally, that's what they needed. Now, in retrospect, I'm glad I wasn't there, and not that sounds selfish, but I'm glad I wasn't, because so many people ended up getting really bad diseases from all of, like, lung diseases from all of the smells and the chemicals that were in the the air from this. And when I tell you that smell lingered for months, I mean, it was just, it's not a smell that you would ever be familiar with. It was like iron and flesh, and it was just dirt, and it just was not good, right? And so, but I will tell you the camaraderie. So if you've ever seen like memes on Instagram or Facebook or somewhere, and they're like, I want the world to be like it was on September 12th. Well, yes. See, here's the problematic part. You don't, and this is the problem I have with like so many people who just can only see negativity and only scrolls down to negative stuff, and is like, you say that on September 12th and you're like, oh my God, look, kumbaya, September 11th. Remember. Yes, please remember. But also remember the camaraderie that was after that. And then people forget it, and 3 days later, they're shitty again, and people are pissed off, and until next year, right? So it's like selective. So fast forward ahead, there was a time, so they blocked so many roads in the city for obvious reasons. They were still doing recovery. They had to have a lot of repair. All these things were going on. And Bugsy's grandma at the time was in Brooklyn. So we were finally able to get him over there, and we were going to go out because we just need a minute. Like, we want to go out, have some drinks. We just need to get the hell out. Well, inadvertently, and mind you, everything's blocked off downtown, like downtown by the towers. But I'm not sure how we got directed into this area. And I remember looking at him and I want to say we might have people in the car. I can't remember. And I kept saying, this doesn't seem right. Like we're the only, how are we here? Now we see really bright lights, which happened to be like where they were working on ground zero. I mean, now it's ground zero, but they still had like the partial buildings were erected and like all these things were happening. And I realized we're going more down, like we're going down. We're supposed to be going uptown, but we're still, and because roads are cut and all this stuff, we literally come up and you can see, like we're sitting there. You can see the lights are on. You can see part of the building structure. You can see the diggers, you know, God, what are they? You know what I'm saying? The diggers, the excavators. You can see firemen. You can see people. And literally, because, you know, we were kind of in a good mood to go out. And literally, we were just all like, what the hell? There's no other like regular people there. Like, how the hell do we end up here? And so, in the smell, and just the sight, the smell, the feel, the taste, the vibe. And we're like, oh my God, we got to get out of here. Like, how do we get out of here? And so, we're trying to figure out our way. I can't get out of there fast enough. Get over to the West Side Highway. And as we're coming out, because again, not like layman people are there. It's the volunteers. It's all of the people who are really doing heroic work and all these things. Well, on the West Side Highway, they had a bunch of people outside with signs and people will come out all hours of the night. Again, community. Thanks for your support. Great job. Thanks for your sacrifice, for working. And of course, I'm like, oh my God, people are like cheering for us and waving to like we're doing work. I'm like, oh my God, this is mortifying. Let's just come in. Because, you know, you're like, okay, because you don't want to be rude. So now you have to wave to the people and you're like, oh my God, this is fake. Like, I'm really not helping people. Like, hi, like, hello. It's just really a weird vibe. So finally we got up and was like, oh my God, we just need to get some drinks. Like something needs to happen like right now. So it took a while to get our vibe back. But you know, we eventually did. It was just, you know, it was just kind of one of those things. You can't stay in the sadness and the stress because that serves no purpose for anybody or anything, right? And so over the next couple weeks and next couple months, you know, it is a vibe. It is people are helping people. People are trying to find people. People are, because at the time it didn't have a monument down there. And it took months for them to get ground zero the way it is, like clear, right? For obvious reasons. And again, like, you know, I knew some people who had a bunch of the rescue animals and then other animals down there who were like, you know, the military animals, like in there saving people and not, and like all these things were happening. And so we were on the 18th floor in our apartment. And then now this is where terrorist threats started to happen. It's when anthrax was out. Like anthrax, people were getting anthrax in the mail. All these things were happening. All this disease, poison. Like, you know how we have like the COVID now? It was like anthrax, right? Except for different, obviously. And so I had gone down to get the mail and had a magazine. And now I don't realize, because how could you? But I'm going to tell you, in case you ever get magazines still. I opened up my mail, Now, of course, I wasn't even thinking anthrax. I'm just whatever. And I'm flipping through the magazine and there's like white powder in there. Well, inadvertently, it's baby powder. They do that so the pages don't stick. However, again, I didn't think anything of it. Set it on the table. No. And I glance out the window because 18th floor, you can see down. And I see all these people in like yellow hazmat suits. People coming up in white vans, all this stuff. I was like, what the hell's going on down there? Oh. Again, looks like a movie. So I'm like, what is happening? So I called down to like the front desk. And they're like, yeah, don't come downstairs. You have to stay in your apartment. I'm like, okay, well, A, I wouldn't have known that. B, what the hell's going on? And they're like, well, somebody opened up the mail. They found a white powdered substance. It could be anthrax. And I was like, oh, what? Like, what do you mean it could be anthrax? Like, so now I already have anxiety. Now I'm a little bit like, what the fuck? Like, what? Like, this is not good. So they have to come up. They have to get stuff. Again, it's like you're watching something where everybody's in hazmat suits. They look at you like you are a diseased plague, you know? So come to find out, luckily it was like baby powder. I was like, okay, good. Okay. Oh my gosh. And then where my husband was working right across the street, they had an anthrax. They actually had anthrax. So it was this whole big thing. And so this went on for so long. So then when I went back, I had to go into Cincinnati, but I was like, I'm not going to be flying from Newark Airport where a plane got stolen. So I drove, but then I was like, okay, I ain't driving anymore. I'm just going to have to take my chance getting on a plane because I cannot just keep driving 10, 12 hours days one way. And so, I went into an office probably, maybe a month later, maybe a little bit more than that. And I was doing so. Don't even ask me what I was doing. I mean, at this point, I'm just trying to get through the motions of life. And I see all these flowers banners and plaques and people are a little sad. And of course, I'm like, of course they're sad because of everything that happened. Duh. But I'm sitting down and waiting to see whoever I was there to see and talking to somebody. And they're like, you could tell they're somber. I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I know it's been a vibe around here. It's just been terrible. And like, yeah, my dad, brother, I can't remember. It wasn't dad, but it was like somebody, a coworker or whatever the guy was. He's the like head guy who like took down the plane in Pennsylvania. And I'm like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. Like everywhere I was, it was like tragedy, trauma, tragedy. And while I was still processing my own, I was making sure, and I guess I was put in those places. This is how I look at it. I was put in those places to try to help people try to work through the acceptance piece of it. Because when you go through trauma, especially on a global level, you have a really hard time accepting it. But whether you accept it or not, it doesn't change it. And yes, of course, it's a process to get through it. But that's the trauma healing vibe that I'm always doing with people and getting you through the trauma, is to acknowledge that it exists, but try not to get stuck to the trauma bond of what the situation has caused and the fear of the unknown. Because the reality is you could walk out today and a tree could fall on your head. I mean, it literally could. Like, I mean, these are things. So if you're walking around in constant fear of what could happen, you're not really functioning and living. And I feel like people who have gone through other traumas, but we're talking about 9/11 here, is especially when you were in that surroundings and seeing it way different. You guys saw a lot on TV, but you didn't see it. You didn't feel it. You weren't there unless you were there, right? And so it was just a whole different vibe, right? Like as sad as it was, it brought people together. It became, we were a unit. We were like, all these things were just, so it's awful and terrible and awful. I mean, I don't know how many other adjectives I can put of what happened. The camaraderie in that moment and in those months to come was ridiculously amazing. I don't think it would ever be duplicated, and I hope we're never in a situation where it has to be. But all of the stuff that you see, like now we're in 2021, all this shit that you see on social media, people bitching about masks and freaking vaccines. I'm like, listen, I'm going to promise you this. You are putting way too much fucking effort into shit. I mean, you just are. Like when you go through some levels of high levels of trauma, or even on a global level like that, the things that people sweat turn out to be not a big deal. Like that's what I'm saying. Like sometimes we can't see things past ourselves. I'm not asking you to change your vision or version of it. I'm just saying, be careful where you are adopting your energy, where you're farming out your energy. It becomes very problematic. So over a period of time, my friend's dad, who was the police guy who had been on the force, by the way, I guess, I don't know if that's the force. I think that's the cops. But in that house, he was a paid fireman for years. He had seen a million things. He was like on paid leave because he had mass trauma. And now this is trigger warning. So if you're going to get grody about people passing in a very violent way, turn this off because it's a trigger warning. But when I got a chance to talk to him and everything, we were talking, and when he got there, he said he was walking around large piles of bubble gum. That was bodies. And as he was there, he could hear certain bodies hitting above him, like boom, boom, like rain. So you see the one falling guy, you don't see all of the other people who also leapt from the buildings. And so it became very problematic for him, right? Yeah, I mean, obviously, the scenes, the sight, the smells, the sounds. He's good. Like he was much better after, period of time. And, but the photo surfaced. If you haven't seen it, you can Google falling man 9/11. And there's one specific picture that I want you to look at and it's zoomed in, where he's upside down, right? So he looks like, let's say his one knee is bent. He's got on his shoes and his hands are by his side. So you know how you think like you're going to, if you're falling and you're freaking out, you're flailing, and I'm not saying that he wasn't flailing. I'm just telling you about this one specific image. And it doesn't look like he had just leapt. Like it looks like midway. And think about being high up and think about you're going to plummet to the earth at a very high velocity. Now, could there be a level of shock? Sure. Could you, yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of that, you're not him, you're not going to go through it. But I ask you to look at that because I want you to look at this. There's a level of acceptance in his body language and in his, you can't see his face, but like there's a level of acceptance. And he leapt because I imagine he was above from where the plane, this is before the buildings tumbled, from where the plane was. And so the stairwells weren't there anymore at a certain level. Like a lot of people were able to get out, but if you were above where the planes hit, it was it was not possible. You know what I mean? And think about him at that time. And again, the buildings hadn't fallen. He doesn't know if these more planes are coming. He doesn't know what's happening. Nobody did. And so he jumped, and there's this level of, again, you don't know. It's all speculation, right? Like, was he afraid? Of course he was afraid. But what was his motivation? And is there that part where he was like, well, if I'm going, I'm going to go my way? And there's a lot that comes into play. But if you look at it in that specific picture, I'm not saying his whole fall, in that specific picture, there's a vision and a version of him that is in acceptance. You can just see in that moment. Okay. Or because you can't untake it back, right? You're not going to take that back. But it's become a very iconic photo for several reasons, right? Because you could see it, and it was the AP photographer who got it at that I don't say perfect time. That's dumb. But like he took the shot, not at a perfect time, but he was able to get the perfect image in the aspect to show people certain versions of like what was happening. And in some way, as awful as it was, at least I know for a lot of people in the city, for some reason that we found some odd piece in it for him, but it was just bizarre. So if you get a chance, you should really look at that as well. And, so yeah, do I have PTSD by it? Maybe, I don't have PTSD in the fact where I'm like, I'm not going to get on a plane, or I'm not going to do this, or I can't let it go. No. But I've also done a lot of healing work of my own. So if I had some PTSD, I won't say it's gone. I just think I've learned to really cope with it a lot. No, I don't. Have I had dreams about it? Sure. Have I had nightmares about it? Sure. And I'm also 20 years removed from it with a lot of healing. And, I will tell you that one of the things, so on one of the towers, when you go down the West Side Highway, when the towers were still erect, especially if you're going to go into the tunnel, they had an umbrella, it was like a lit umbrella, like a big umbrella on one of the buildings. So if it was raining outside, the umbrella would be lit up. Like, not that you needed to know that it was raining, you're driving, but it was just a symbol. And that bugged me for a while. Like when I was driving up the West Side Highway and looking in the rearview mirror, number one, it felt weird not seeing the towers. Number two, it felt weird not looking at that, because even when it wasn't lit up on a sunny day, you could still see the outline of the umbrella. I was like, oh man, that kind of sucks. Like that umbrella's not, I don't know why that umbrella meant so much to me, but at the time it did. But I'll tell you some things that I've taken from it was just what I said to you earlier, right? Was, what are you sweating? Yes, I know you have big things that are going on in your life. You have issues that are very real and very big deal to you. Breathe. Is this going to matter 5 years from now? Breathe. Right? And it's like, yeah, you're allowed to have your traumas and your feelings. And it's like I said, those days are burned in my brain. They're not going anywhere. I can tell you almost what I was wearing. I can tell you the vibe. I can tell you when my husband walked in the door at the time. I can tell you, they're visually there, not in a, I don't want to say not in a bad way, but they're just there. I don't know. You have things in your life where you just, it doesn't matter. You know exactly what you were doing, where you were. But yet, if you ask me what I did 5 days ago, I'll be like, I have no clue. Right. So I think it all depends on how you're absorbing the trauma, because ultimately it's a huge trauma. And, like I said, it gets a little weird, because when you see 9/11, 9/12, and all these other days come along, you remember and you post your stuff on social media, and you take a moment of silence, and you're there. And no, I don't want you to stay in the drama, but that feeling that you can remember of pulling together as a human and not focusing on what somebody isn't doing or what somebody doesn't have or what you don't have, or, you focus on your gratitude. You don't get to be grateful when it's just a good day. That means, that means that you got to focus on your gratitude when it's not a good day. You got to focus on your gratitude when you feel as though things aren't going well. You have to focus on your gratitude when things are going great, but you don't get to selectively do it. So if you're going to be in a state of honor, in a state of balance, in a state of presence, in a state of love, then you got to remain there. You don't get to do it just once a year. You don't get to do it just in a selective state of mind. And it's a lot because you have your own shit that you're going through. I agree. I hear you. I got my own. I hear you. We have our own fears. We have our own worries, our own concerns. They are real to us. And I'm not asking you not to pay attention to them. But if you only pay attention to them, it's going to be really difficult for you to see anything other than negative. So in closing of this podcast, like I said, I send so much love to the people who were affected immediately. I'm talking family members. I'm talking first response. To the amount of gratitude and the amount of love and the amount of energy in which I'm sending to you guys, it's not even measurable. And for everybody else who was around the world, this goes gratitude for all of you. But for those of you who are in the city and who were around all of the other places in where you weren't a victim, but you were the collateral damage of everything energetically that was going on, and yet you pulled together. Like, I love you guys, man. Like, you could be a stranger on the street and love you. Like, I got you. I hear you. That vibe, man. And just my big reminder to you guys, right, is be grateful. Be grateful. Take pause. Stop worrying about, should I go through my partner's shit on their social media? That is not that deep, man. Breathe. Let's not make something bigger than it needs to be, So with that being said, guys, I love you guys. And like I said, be grateful, be kind. You do not have to agree with everybody, but damn, man, being kind, it takes nothing. It is free. You don't have to work for it. Just be kind and don't worry about somebody else's actions. Stop it. Right? So remember, guys, gratitude, breathe, stay present, be kind, and golly, most importantly, be consistent in that kindness.